ولم يكن له كفوا أحد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآله. Jazakallah. I would now like to request Brother Ayan to please step forward and recite a Marsiya. Bawaz buland salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है, हाय बाबा तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है, कैसे दरवाज़ा हटाऊं, कैसे दरवाज़ा हटाऊं, कैसे मोहसिन को बचाऊं, सांस सीने में रुकी है, तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है, हाथ में जिसके मेरा हाथ दिया था तुमने, कह के मन कुन तो जिसे मौला कहा था तुमने, मैंने हर मोड़ पे बाबा साथ उसका है निभाया, क्या मेरा जुर्म यही है, तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है, तेरी उम्मत ने बना दी है ये हालत बाबा, तेरी उम्मत ने बना दी है ये हालत बाबा, कोई पसली भी नहीं मेरी सलामत बाबा, सांस लेती हूँ मैं जिस दम, रुकने लगता है मेरा दम, सिर्फ मरने की कमी है, तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है, हाय बाबा तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है, शर्म आती है भला तुमको बाबा, शर्म आती है भला तुमको, बताऊं कैसे ये तमाचों के निशा तुमको दिखाऊं कैसे तुम न पहचान सकोगे, देख कर मुझे से कहोगे क्या मेरी ज़हरा यही है। तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है, हाय बाबा। तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है, ये अज़ियत ये ही खामोशी नहीं देखी जाती, मुझसे तन्हाई अली की नहीं देखी जाती, तेरा पैगाम सुनाने हक विलायत का बताने ज़हरा घर घर में गई है। तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है, और जब से हसनैन के बाबा से सुना है ये कलाम, जब से हसनैन के बाबा से सुना है ये कलाम, कि मुझको अब कोई मदीने में नहीं करता सलाम, तब से ये हाल है मेरा अपना गम भूल के बाबा, बस मुझे फिक्र अली है। तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है, हाय बाबा। तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है। बर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु
Jazakallah, Brother Ayan. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Respected scholar, elders, brothers and sisters in faith, Assalamu alaikum. My condolences to all mu'mineen on this very sad occasion. May Imam Zamana Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahum, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, accept our condolences. Alhamdulillah, we are pleased to welcome Sayyid Hasan Ali Rizvi from Orlando once again as our guest speaker this weekend. Shortly, the Sayyid will ascend the member. Today's program will inshallah end with Namaz-e-Maghribain. Once again, before the program commences, I would like to thank our sustaining members, donors, and volunteers whose contributions are helping CFK's vision come to fruition and enabling us to serve the community's social and religious needs. For information on how to become a sustaining member, please contact our membership director, Brother Asif Patel. For opportunities to donate and sponsor programs like tonight, please join the CFK WhatsApp group or visit cfkdfw.org. We are always looking for volunteers who can help behind the scenes. For those who are willing, please contact me, Brother Mazhar Abbas, Brother Asad Jafri, or any of the existing volunteers. Let us now all recite a Surah Fatiha and 3 times Surah Ikhlas for the marhumin of tonight's program sponsors. Marhumin of Sister Naseem Jagani and family, the marhumin who don't have anyone to pray for them, all our marhumin, and the marhumin of the Ummah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. I would now like to request Sayyid to please ascend to the member. Ba'az buland salawat.
One more loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد. For the love of the beloved daughter of Rasulullah, Sayyida Fatimiyah al-Zahra alayhi salatu wassalam, please recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, salamun alaykum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. I first would like to offer my condolences to the Imam of the time, to all of the Ahlul Bayt, and to all mu'mineen and mu'minat as we commemorate the Shahada anniversary of our beloved Lady of Light. And many of you know that there are varying different reports about her date of death. So normally now we've commemorated 2 different Fatimiyahs, one being today, the 13th of Jumad al-Awwal, and another report, which we sometimes call the second Fatimiyah, which coincides with the 3rd of Jumad al-Thani. What I wanted to discuss, inshallah, today, and if we have time, maybe continue the topic tomorrow. You know, Islam and Muslims have been under attack for a very long time. And we get hit at from all different angles, right? Sometimes the attacks are coming from outside, meaning it's coming from non-Muslims, Christians, Jews, atheists, agnostics, anybody who doesn't like some part of our religion will come and attack it. Right? Sometimes the attacks are coming from within as well. Either it's coming from other sects or other groups of Muslims, right, attacking Shia specifically, or it's even our Shia brothers and sisters who sometimes don't like certain ideas within our belief system, our aqaid, our aqidah, our theology, and they begin to slowly try to destroy and deconstruct the ideas and things that we believe. And sometimes these attacks come from, it's usually like these two different camps you have. Sometimes these attacks come from the right wing, meaning very traditional, cultural types of individuals. And sometimes it comes from the left wing, meaning liberal, progressive, individualistic, etc. Right? So we're getting hit at from all different angles. And there's a lot of different ways that they attack Islam and Muslims. I'm sure many of you, you come to lectures and you expect some of these questions to be answered, right? Like a lot of times, one of the famous questions is about all these so-called violent, ayat of the Quran. Okay, the Quran says go and kill non-Muslims everywhere. Okay, how do you answer that? The Quran says that, mushrikeen and non-Muslims are najis. How do you answer this, right? So sometimes the ayat of the Quran, people don't like that, and they want us to give us answers, why do you believe in something like this? Sometimes we have to answer on behalf of the behavior of Muslims themselves, right? When you see like all these extremist groups like Daesh, the Taliban, etc., people will come to us and say, look, we see these individuals who claim to be, Muslims like you, and they're committing these disgusting acts. Is this coming from Islam or not? Right? How are you going to respond to this? One of the main areas of attack is when it comes to the idea of women's rights. And I want to expand on this point for tonight, inshallah, in honor of the personality of Bibi Fatimah al-Zahra alayha salatu wasalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. Sometimes when somebody tries to respond to all these criticisms about women's rights in Islam, or the lack thereof, right? They'll say, okay, you treat your women like this, they're oppressed, these rules don't make sense, why are they only getting half inheritance? All these questions that come about. And sometimes you and I, we probably have the same questions too. I've sat in enough Q&As, I know. I've helped out with madrasa classes too. It's a common question that people ask. Why is it that hijab is wajib for women, but it's not wajib for men? What's the reason? Why is it that inheritance is different? Why are there differences in rules for the different genders? Why is it like that? And people want to know. And sometimes you ask because you're curious and you want to try to find out the reasons, and that's good. Other times, people have a specific idea or agenda in their mind, and they want to kind of destroy the foundations of Islam through this sort of questioning. And that's why I mentioned that sometimes the worst attacks don't come from the outside. It's not non-Muslims who are attacking us and really destroying our faith. It's usually our own family members and friends. Sometimes even speakers and scholars who are spreading misinformation or incorrect information and attacking the foundations of our beliefs. And sometimes even you and I, when we mean well, and, let's say a friend of yours or colleague or maybe your own children, they come to you and they ask a question. Again, maybe about hijab or anything. And, out of ikhlas and sincerity, you want to try to answer their question, so you offer them some answer. Sometimes the way that we respond to their questions is not just unsatisfactory. It's not just like it's a bad answer, but it actually causes more damage. And it opens up a whole nother set of doors and Pandora's box and a can of worms. And they're like, what kind of answer is that? That doesn't make any sense at all. Sometimes the way that people answer the question about, these differences between men and women, a lot of times when I've heard, individuals, sometimes even speakers, usually those who, let's say, are trained overseas and have immigrated over here, not all the time, but generally, the way that they start to answer these gender difference questions makes it seem like they're trying to say, well, men are at this level and women are at this level. That's why the laws are different. So if the way they're going to answer the question, in their response, they're pretty much directly or indirectly saying men are superior and women are inferior, then wouldn't we expect everybody to run away from Islam? Wouldn't we expect, at least women to say, look, if you're going to call me inferior, then why would I be a part of this faith? It doesn't make any sense. And any other person that maybe had some interest in Islam before, say, look, if that's what you believe, then what's the point? What kind of religion is this? It doesn't make any sense. And you see that some people, they want to maintain their Muslim Islamic identity. And when they hear some of these answers or responses, and they hear the jawab that people give about, hijab, inheritance, all these things, they just don't like it. So this doesn't make sense. So what they end up having to do then is say, look, this part of Islam then, we're going to have to just cut this out. We have no other choice. And this is where you get this sort of new trend of like liberal, progressive Islam, right? They say, look, this hijab thing, it doesn't make sense. We don't get it. So it's simple. Let's just cut it out and get rid of it. And we can try to come up with very fancy reasons and pseudo-academic reasons that, yes, hijab made sense for that time. It doesn't make sense anymore, right? Times have changed. We've progressed. We've evolved, etc. Right? That's I'm simplifying the arguments that they've given. There's much more there, but that's basically what they say. We've evolved. Our intellects are superior. Back then, these dumb Arabs, they didn't know what they were doing. That's why all these laws were like that. Society was different. But now, we're different. We're in the modern world. We have technology and science and all this stuff. So these laws don't matter. The only thing that matters is the basic morality in Islam. Just be a good person and that's it. All these laws, especially these laws for women specifically, they don't matter anymore. And you see a lot of these famous speakers and scholars, both men and women, right? A lot of them are academics, PhDs. They have, a big crowd following among Muslims. They preach a lot of this stuff, and some of their arguments, they seem attractive, right? They seem like they make sense. And it's, again, sometimes because of the way that you and I respond to these ideas. And I'll get into a bit more detail, inshallah, if you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So normally, I give examples of some of the famous sort of speakers that are out there that have these ideas. I'm going to leave that aside for now. I think most of you who are well aware of the sort of contemporary modern discussions in the academic world, in the Muslim world, in the Shia world, you know the different personalities and their ideas, those who claim that, again, there is no such thing as hijab anymore, or that, for example, women can lead mixed-gendered prayers, and these kind of ideas. There's very famous people who have these ideas. So yeah, I'm not going to bother going through that. So what I want us to at least just start to think about tonight is how then should we start to approach all of these issues? If we're saying that perhaps our approach, our method, the way that we answer it is wrong, well, what should we be doing then? So what I want to start off with first is, well, let's actually figure out the different ways that we've been trained to answer the questions. And let's figure out if these are good ways or not. If they're good, let's keep them. If they're not, then we should maybe, put them in our pocket, keep them away for a little while, and think about if there's a better, deeper, more intellectual way of answering some of these questions. So let's start with the first method. If you can recite another salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So again, we're focusing on the idea of women's rights and women's issues in Islam, right? That's what we're focusing on right now. So the first method that speakers, scholars, or somebody like you and I may use when we're trying to answer these questions is a historical method. Again, think about it. Somebody comes to you and they say, look, women are oppressed in Islam. The rules don't make sense. You treat women as inferior. Our response sometimes is historical, socio-historical. Well, what does that mean? The line that all of us come up with, and I'm sure when I say it, you're all going to be like, yeah, that's the line I use, is that Islam came to give women rights when they didn't have any before in that society, right? In that Arab society, 1400 years ago, before that, in that pre-Islamic Arabian society, women had no rights. They were treated as subhuman. They were treated as nothing, but Islam came. Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he came with this revolutionary idea of Islam, this new deen, and it changed the way that women were viewed and treated in society. So, no, yes, we do agree women were oppressed, but Islam came to free them from that oppression, right? So this is the argument that usually we give. So in this method, what we do is, the first thing is, and to set up the argument, we take a fact about history that they were doing, those pre-Islamic Arabs. So this is what they were doing, and this is how Islam came to fix it. So let's go with one simple example of female infanticide, right? That the Arabs of that time, they thought that it was a curse and a plague. It was bad luck to basically have daughters. And many of them, unfortunately, na'udhu billah, because of that, they were burying their daughters alive. Right? So of course Rasulullah came and stopped this practice. Islam came and stopped this practice. So again, that's 1 point for Islam. Rasulullah came and stopped this practice. Okay. The idea of marriage rights, dowry, mahr. They say before that, when a woman would get married off to and go into a different tribe, it was the men or the tribal head leaders that would exchange the money, the dowry, right? So the family, the family of the bride, they would give the money directly to the family of the groom. So it was basically just exchange between the men. That's it. Islam came and said, no, that mahr, that dowry money needs to go to the bride herself. She's entitled to that money. We say, see, point 2 for Islam. Look, another check mark. Islam came in, freed women. Right to ownership, divorce rights, etc. Right? So what we do is we mention the historical fact that this is what the Arabs were doing, pre-Islamic Arabs. It was wrong. Islam came and it fixed it. And now it's done. And we say, there, see, now do you understand? Now are you ready to say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah? Have you been convinced that Islam is the truth now? Now, if you explain this to a modern individual, maybe for you and I, as we were growing up, maybe these arguments made sense. And I'm not saying it's completely inaccurate. Obviously, there's some accuracy there, definitely. But do you really think that this is going to convince the average person you're speaking to right now? Probably not, right? A lot of these answers would probably just turn them off completely. What is this dowry that you're giving? Why are you paying women off? What's going on? Why are you doing that? This seems really, really strange. Or they'll talk about, they'll say, you know what, maybe some of those things were bad in terms of right of ownership, in terms of female infanticide. Okay, your religion, Islam, changed that. That's wonderful. But it's not like we need it anymore. All those rules, right, they had a stopping point at that time in Arabia. Where have you guys progressed from there? What are you doing now afterwards? You guys had a stop. You didn't progress afterwards. And so the example they'll give, for example, is hijab. Say, look, your hijab rule, maybe we might agree that it was great back then, but we've progressed. We don't need a covering over people's heads to make them modest. Men are, that they've improved as well. So we don't have to have these rules anymore. So you guys are backwards. You were fine for 1400 years ago, but right now you don't make any sense. So you're outdated. And that's the response that usually they will give. So maybe for certain issues, this example or this method of talking about historical facts might work. But generally speaking, it actually might come back and bite us. So let's stop with that method and let's go to the second one after a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So the first method was talking about the social, historical context of the Arabian society at that time. That's one method. The second method that sometimes we use is basically just being reactive and being defensive, right? So I'm going to give the very famous example that most of you, I'm sure, have heard of as well, right? It's that famous ayah in Surah An-Nisa, right? Surah 4, ayah 34, which starts with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ar-Rijal Qawwamuna ala Nisa. And if you look in many different translations, you can, pick and choose whatever ones. The basic idea that people think it says is that men are superior to women, right? That's the takeaway there. And then towards the end, it talks about if a wife disobeys her husband, there's certain steps that a husband is allowed to go through, and one of them is using physical violence, right? That's what people see. And immediately, either non-Muslims or even Muslims say, what is going on over here? Number one, you're saying that men are superior, and then two, they can, you're okay with domestic abuse? What is this? So what is the reactionary response? One, usually what we hear is, it's just a bad translation, right? Oh, that's not what this means. Okay, there's what, I think I've seen now 60 to 80 different English translations of the Quran out there. The only way you can escape these ideas is if you're disingenuous to the Arabic. You can't just say that this is a bad translation. Because if 40 to 50 of these translators are all using the same words, superiority and maintenance, striking, lightly beating, whatever words they're using, it doesn't make Islam sound very pretty. It's not going to help us out. So that argument, that reactive, defensive argument is not going to work. And then again, some people say, so this light striking or this beating that you're talking about, وَضْرِبُهُنَّ, which it says there, you're supposed to it's supposed to be very, very light. With a miswak, like a toothbrush, you're just hitting them like that. Are you listening to yourself? You're saying that it's okay to hit them with a toothbrush or a miswak? That's your argument? Honestly, think about it for a second. We want the arguments to be good because we don't want to see any holes or gaps in our faith, definitely. We want to try to, defend the Quran and defend our deen, but we have to be honest sometimes. Like, are you telling me that we are defending domestic abuse as long as it's light abuse, so it's okay? As long as you stick with using, don't use an electric toothbrush, use a manual toothbrush, and you're okay. Like, what are you talking about? So these sort of very defensive, reactive arguments are not really strong. It doesn't make sense, and I guarantee you, whenever these arguments are given to most Muslims, they're laughing too. They're like, look, this is not going to work for us as well, right? Another issue is, of course, the issue of needing 2 female witnesses, right, in a court case. So look, in order to be a witness in a court of law, an Islamic court of law, either you can have 1 male or you can have 2 females. So we'll say, okay, well, what's going on over here? We'll say, well, do you know that, okay, fine, back in society then, women weren't really out and about, so it was highly unlikely for them to witness things in public. That's why we need 2 witnesses. Like, okay, fine. Are you willing to get rid of that law or not? Because obviously women now are out and about. That same issue doesn't apply anymore, right? So what are you going to do there? If somebody responds to you like that, says, look, society's changed, so that means your religion's going to change too now, isn't it? Are you going to evolve and progress with the times or not? So again, your reactive, defensive argument's not working anymore, right? And there's so many issues we can talk about. Same thing, right? Getting less inheritance, the idea of hijab specifically. And this one is probably the worst one, right? The usual argument, response that we talk about when it comes to hijab. Well, what is this idea? Why do women cover themselves up like this? We say, oh, because men, and we turn this into the very, sort of physical argument. That's why women have to cover themselves up because men are disgusting animals, or, something like that. It makes us look bad, obviously, right, guys? Like, that's why. Women have to cover themselves up. If they don't, then who knows what we're going to do? I mean, first I'll respond like, are men really that bad? That's debatable, obviously, if we're that bad. But is that really a good response? And the problem is this. Let's just say that we want to use that response and say, yeah, the reason for hijab has to do with the sort of physical attraction and protection of women and all that stuff. Like, okay. Now, if any person knows a little bit more about Islam, any non-Muslim or somebody, again, a Muslim themselves, just thinks about it for an extra 2 to 5 seconds, they'll say, okay, you're claiming that the reason why women are supposed to observe hijab, a covering of everything except for the face and hands, they have to do that, and not men, is for their physical protection in terms of being attracted and all that stuff. Like, that's your reasoning? Yeah, that's our reasoning. Great. Now tell me, when a woman is reading namaz, reading salah by herself, does she have to cover up or not? Does she? Yeah. Who's she covering herself from? If she knows without, 100% guaranteed there's no men that will ever walk in that area, she's by herself, offering her salah, she still has to observe hijab. So that whole physical argument now is gone. There's nobody's going to come and look at her. And what are you going to say? Oh, she's covering herself from God? Na'udhu billah. What kind of argument are you making? So this argument, if somebody just thinks about it for a few seconds, it's deficient, it's weak. Maybe it's okay, for some individuals it might work. But if you take it just another step forward, you see these arguments have way too many gaps and way too many holes. Please recite as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now look, I'm going through this for a reason. I'm not trying to be negative. Well, a little bit I am, actually. It would be great if we could go one by one through each and every issue and then offer proper responses. Well, we don't have the time. We can't really do that, right? I'm not going to go on for an hour. It's not going to happen, right? If maybe we have time, we can maybe go to 1 or 2 extra issues tomorrow. I don't know, maybe. But that's not what I have in mind for tonight. What I wanted to try to get across is that if we're truly trying to understand and then eventually defend our deen, we have to make sure that we're not satisfied with these very general, superficial answers. Again, if you were satisfied with them before and they were good enough for you, that's fine. But we have to be very careful, especially if we're going to go and try to, become ambassadors for the religion and go and talk to our, colleagues and classmates and coworkers about the religion. And, everybody's questioning us about this stuff, right? And again, it's not even non-Muslims. It's our own people. Or more so, it's speakers and scholars who sit on the minbar themselves, or again, a podium, or they're giving some symposium at a university, who are bringing these issues to light and saying these arguments don't work anymore. And their result or their solution is we'll start cutting this stuff out of Islam. Now, of course, the conclusion is no, these things don't need to be cut out of Islam. We don't have to adjust Islam. The idea is that our understanding of Islam is very superficial. We have to be the ones that change. We don't have to change Islam. It's a Muslim that changes, not Islam itself. But that is a long process to be so established in our deen that we can understand each and every issue from all different angles. So that any person who comes to you, whether they're a young child or somebody who's got a bachelor's in religion, or maybe somebody with a PhD in Islamic history, you should be able to respond to them in a way that they can understand. Without, sometimes, maybe these arguments that we've mentioned, maybe they work. Other times, it requires us to go a little bit deeper. Now, how can we do that? How can we actually go deeper and offer a more substantive answer? It's going to take us going beyond just simply looking at history. It's going to take us going beyond giving these reactionary, defensive, kind of quick and easy McDonald's drive-through fast food answers. And we're going to have to look at Islam from a more holistic perspective. And specifically, we're going to have to start thinking about more metaphysical, spiritual, and philosophical answers. If we don't start to look at Islam from those lenses, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to be able to, one, defend our deen to anybody else, but more importantly, we may not be able to keep deen in our hearts ourselves. Because every single little doubt that enters into us, the word that pretty much in all of our languages for doubt is shak, right? Interestingly, in Arabic, so the word shak, the noun that it comes from, actually means to pierce something, right? The verb shakka means to pierce. And it's a very interesting idea, because what is a doubt? It's basically like somebody's pierced into the fiber of your being. Sometimes when you don't have an answer to a question, it just sits there, it bothers you. Imagine you get, you're driving to, the center, and then on the way, your tire gets pierced. Right? There's a hole in your tire, right? A nail gets stuck in there, you hear it. If you keep driving like that, eventually you're going to damage your rim or your hubcap, whatever you have. If that goes, then your rotors and everything's going to start breaking, and slowly you're going to have nothing left. You won't be able to drive anymore. A lot of us, we've let those doubts just sit in our mind year after year after year without, we should be taking the extra effort and going and researching and asking. You have qualified ulama, right, in the community, alhamdulillah. We have to be the ones to take the next step, to go out and research, ask the questions, to make sure we don't allow these punctures to remain in our wujud, in our being. The longer it remains, we'll see, and again, think about your own self. Anytime you have these doubts and they linger, what does it affect? It affects every other aspect of your being too. That one little doubt, you may not see it, but maybe there's a reason why you don't have that energy to wake up for Fajr anymore. Or when it's Salah time, maybe you're like, I should pray on time, but I can delay it for 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour, whatever. It's not a big deal. Because all those, theological doubts, the doubts about the faith themselves, will obviously translate into action. Because if some part of you is like, maybe this stuff is not real. Maybe there is no God. Maybe he's not just. Maybe these rules are all made up. And maybe the system is a bunch of, patriarchal nonsense or, whatever it is. Well, then of course you're going to stop practicing. And what we want to make sure is we have the abstract theological ideas in our mind, our usul, so that we can go ahead and practice the furu the way we want to. And you'll see that if you strengthen the usul, then you also see your furu strengthen as well. And you ask anybody, once they get a stronger understanding of the ideas, the abstract ideas. You all just completed the Secrets of Salah workshop recently, right? How many of you have seen an immediate change in your Salah because of that? All these wonderful abstract, theoretical, philosophical ideas immediately cause a change in the way that you offer your Salah. Imagine now we have the idea behind hijab. Or more importantly, the idea for why there are two genders in the first place. Why are human beings created? If we can start with these initial questions, then we'll start to see some of these puzzle pieces start to fit where they belong. And then we get a more holistic idea of what Allah wants us to understand about this reality. Inshallah, we'll try to continue this discussion tomorrow afternoon. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And we'll, of course, offer, as we end tonight's speech, just a few short words of Masa'ib and Musibah. We we're having a discussion with some of the sisters in another community recently, and we were asking them, if you were to describe the modern Muslimah, modern, Muslim woman, what words would you use to describe them? What one word or phrase would you use? And many of them use the word exhausted, tired, overworked, overwhelmed. And it's interesting because you have these beings, right? The female creature, they have this infinite capacity to be able to manifest these divine qualities in a way that men cannot do. And when they have that capacity, they also take on certain burdens that no one else can take on. And because of that, they're tried and tested in ways that men are never tested. Look at how from the beginning of the life of our beloved Bibi, she is tried and tested and given this masa'ib and musibah over and over and over again. Most of us, we don't understand masa'ib until we get much, much older. When we start to lose elders or we get sick and things like that. We don't really understand real musibah. But for Fatimah al-Zahra, the beginning of her life is filled with this. She has to watch her beloved father be abused, beaten, have garbage thrown on him constantly, being cursed at and insulted in public. She sees him coming home and she's there to tend to his wounds, to take care of him, to be his support. Abiha, like a mother to her own father. She's there watching how her own mother, Bibi Khadija, who was the queen of the Arabs. She was one of the elite women of that society. She saw how everybody abandoned her own mother. How her mother was being abused and insulted in public. Can you imagine, as a child, can you imagine having to see your parents being abused in public like this? To be demeaned and dishonored and disgraced like this? But Bibi Fatima was there as an anchor and a support for both of them. But imagine a young girl. Now, her first heartache comes from when she loses her mother at a very young age. And imagine a young girl like this seeing Rasulullah shed tear after tear after tear, crying for years because of the loss of Bibi Khadija. And then one by one, the various support systems for Rasulullah, they fall. And Bibi Fatima is watching Rasulullah trying to guide the ummah, and they just toss away and refuse his guidance. Until her heart breaks and she has to watch her father leave the dunya. And then her grief continues as she tries to become a support system for her husband, for her Mawla, for her Imam, for Imam Ali. And again, she's going door to door trying to get that support, saying, don't you remember what you promised at Ghadir? Why are you abandoning your Imam? Why are you abandoning the promise that you gave, the bay'ah that you gave there? She's going single-handedly there, door to door. Imagine how difficult it was for her then, now that she has to leave behind her young children. She has to leave behind her husband. How difficult must her last moments have been with Imam Ali, according to some narrations. This woman who had gone through so much, argued for her rights in front of these zalimeen, been attacked by these zalimeen, lost her child because of these zalimeen, her unborn child. And now in her last moments, some historians say, while she's there with Imam Ali in her last moments, as she's reciting her wasiyah, as she's saying, Ya Abul Hasan, don't leave my grave alone. Come and recite Quran for me. Recite something nice for me so that I receive these blessings while I've passed on. Take care of Hasan and take special care of Hussein because Hussein is very attached to me. Don't leave him alone. Keep Hussein attached to yourself. Don't leave him alone. And then the one phrase which probably destroyed the heart of Amir al-Mu'mineen, this lady of light with utmost humility says, Ya Abul Hasan araditani, are you happy with me? Was I a good wife to you? Was I a good mother to our children? Did I do a good job? Imam Ali's heart breaks. He says, how can you ask me a question like this? You are the greatest part of my life. You are the greatest gift that Allah has given me. I should ask you, Ya Fatima araditani, are you pleased with me? Did I do a good job to you? You are the amanat from Rasulullah, and I've allowed this to happen to you only because your father told me in order to me to be patient. How can I be patient after this? You were my flower, you were my support. What can I do after this? And now the biggest bala will come when Imam now has to go and perform the ghusl of his beloved Bibi, which we will mention tomorrow night. على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. Ya Allah, we ask you by the right of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, by the right of Fatima, by the right of Mohsin, to forgive all mu'mineen, mu'minat, all Muslimin, Muslimat, all of our marhumin, marhumat. Ya Allah, by the right of Bibi Fatima, and by the right of what she stood for, we ask you to help us learn from her example, learn from how she stood up for wilaya, and give us the tawfiq to be the supporters for wilaya as well. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ma'atame Hussein.
Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. हाय बाबा तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है. हाय बाबा तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है. हाय बाबा तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत. कैसे दरवाज़ा हटाऊं, कैसे मोहसिन को बचाऊं. सांस सीने में रुकी है, तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है. हाय बाबा तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है. हाय बाबा तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत. तेरी उम्मत ने बना दी है ये हालत बाबा. कोई पसली भी नहीं मेरी सलामत बाबा. सांस लेती हूँ मैं जिस दम, रुकने लगता है मेरा दम. सिर्फ मरने की कमी है, तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है. हाय बाबा तेरी ज़हरा पे. कभी दरबार में पेशी को बुलाते हैं हमें, कभी दरवाजे पे आके सताते हैं हमें. मेरे ये फूल से बचे पूछते हैं यही मुझसे, क्या खता हमसे हुई है. तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है. हाय बाबा शर्म आती है भला तुमको बताऊं कैसे. ये तमाचों के निशान तुमको दिखाऊं कैसे. तुम न पहचान सकोगे, देख कर मुझसे कहोगे क्या मेरी ज़हरा यही है. तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है। हाय बाबा तेरी आपके सोग में तारीक न देखा गया घर, आग दरवाजे पे उम्मत ने लगा दिया कर। बाबा जाबाद तुम्हारे देखिए घर में हमारे रोशनी कैसी हुई है। तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है। हाय बाबा ख़ब्र ज़हरा से तकल्लुम ये सदा आती है। कितनी सदियों से मेरी ख़ब्र पे वीरानी है। फूल तुरबत पे चढ़ा के एक दिया ला के जला दे। क्या मदीने में कोई है। तेरी ज़हरा पे मुसीबत की घड़ी है। हाय बाबा
Mu'mineen, we will recite Salam Ziyarat after the namaz, inshallah. Please take this time to wuzu if you're not, if you need to. Thank you. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.